He heard the engine first. The late Queen's Range Rover, silent for over a year, rumbling back to life inside the Balmoral garage. But no one was scheduled to drive it. No log, no royal clearance, no permission. And when Sergeant Reddick stepped closer, he learned it wasn't just being started. It was being handed to Camilla's son. That vehicle wasn't just a car. It held the Queen's final journal, her maps, her scent, her chiens. And when they tried to load it into a trailer, when Camilla told him to step aside, when Thomas laughed and waved the papers in his face, the guard did something Balmoral hadn't seen in decades. He screamed. Now, before we show you how Princess Anne responded and what secret was hidden inside the glove box all along, make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, because this wasn't about a car, it was about memory and the one man who refused to let them drive it away. The hum of early autumn at Balmoral was different from London, softer, wilder. The wind still carried pine and peat, and the air held the kind of quiet only a place with memory could manage. Sergeant Lachlan Reddick stood near the edge of the Royal Motor Court, sleeves rolled halfway, clipboard in hand. His boots were clean, his collar squared, but his mind had started to wander until he heard it. A low, unmistakable purr rolled across the gravel. He froze. The sound came again, closer now, deeper than the modern fleet, throatier than the usual runabouts assigned to visiting staff, older, heavier, her. He turned before it came into view. The vintage green Range Rover Defender emerged from behind the hedgerow with the kind of steady growl you could feel in your ribs. Classic square frame, high clearance, custom off-road guard still latched on the front. It rolled like it remembered where it had been and who it had once belonged to. Reddick's chest tightened. No one had started that vehicle in over a year, not since the Queen passed. It wasn't just a car, it was her car, the one she insisted on driving herself when she was in Scotland. No driver, no fuss, rain or shine. Even after Philip died, she'd drive it across the Highlands, up steep rock trails, down to Glen Muick. Staff had joked you could track her moods by the direction she drove that Land Rover, but no one else had ever touched it, and no one was supposed to. After the funeral, Princess Anne had given a quiet order, informal but ironclad. It stays where she left it, keys sealed, no touch. Reddick had been there when the storage tag was logged. He'd watched the keys placed in the sealed cabinet in the Balmoral service wing. He remembered it, because he'd locked the door himself, and yet here it was. Engine warm, wheels dusted, someone behind the wheel. Reddick stepped forward as it rolled into one of the maintenance bays. A junior valet jumped out quickly and began wiping down the side mirrors with a cloth that looked far too clean for the job. The sergeant didn't raise his voice. "Who cleared that vehicle?" The valet blinked. He was barely 20, face pale under the peaked cap. I was just told to prep it, sir." "By whom?" The boy hesitated, then leaned in a little, glancing over his shoulder. "Queen Consort's team said it's being moved to Windsor for her son." Reddick didn't respond right away. He just looked at the engine again. It was still idling softly, like it hadn't forgotten its purpose. Like it was waiting for someone who no longer walked these halls. He turned back to the valet, voice steady. "Turn it off, now!" The valet obeyed. As the engine sputtered to silence, the courtyard somehow felt colder. Reddick didn't shout, didn't swear, didn't accuse. He just walked back toward the storage building, where the sealed cabinet stood, and keyed in the access code. Because whatever this was, it wasn't routine, and it wasn't right. Reddick had always believed in silence, not the ceremonial kind, not the standing still outside Buckingham kind, the real kind, the kind that followed the Queen whenever she drove that Defender through the mist-covered hills of the Highlands. It was the silence of someone who didn't need to announce their presence, someone who simply was. He remembered the first time he saw her behind the wheel. No entourage, no security convoy, just a wool scarf knotted at her chin, 2 dogs bouncing in the back seat, and a gloved hand gripping the wheel like she was born in the seat. She had waved briefly when she saw him on the stable's path, then drove on. No fuss, no spectacle, just control. And now that vehicle, her Defender, was sitting in the bay like any other runabout, doors open, windows being polished like it was a staff pool car on rotation. Reddick stepped into the garage and found the head mechanic, an older man named Foster, who'd served longer than most of the castle's bricks had been laid. "She's on the docket?" Reddick asked. Foster looked up from a clipboard, brow furrowed. "Not on mine, but I was told to have it ready for pickup this afternoon." "By who?" "Valet led. Said it came from Windsor. Something about private family reassignment." Foster flipped a page. "Said Thomas Parker Bowles would be taking possession. Personal transport." Reddick narrowed his eyes. "With what documentation?" Foster gave a half shrug. "Didn't see it, but the boy who drove it in had the key." He paused, then added quietly, "Found it odd, though. That key's been in sealed storage since September last year. I saw the log myself when we archived Her Majesty's effects. Someone would have had to request cabinet access. That requires 2 signatures and a witness. And there's no request form in the system. I checked when the valet showed up with it this morning. Nothing logged, nothing filed. It's like the key just appeared." Reddick felt something cold settle in his gut. Cabinet access without documentation didn't just violate protocol. It suggested someone with enough authority had simply bypassed it entirely. Reddick didn't reply. He walked past the defender again, hands behind his back, and stopped at the rear. It still bore the faded Balmoral sticker just above the tow hitch. No new plate, no logistics marking, just the faint scrape on the boot latch, the one the Queen had refused to buff out. Said it gave the vehicle a bit of truth. He pulled out his encrypted tablet from his duty belt and opened the secure channel tied directly to Princess Anne's equerry. Typed slowly, clearly. "Green Defender in motion. Assigned to TPB. Order not on file. Request guidance." He stared at the screen. Seconds passed. Then the reply came. "Hold the line, she'll come." No further explanation. No clarification. No timestamp. Reddick read it once. Then again. Then he slid the tablet back into his belt, took 3 steps toward the vehicle, and stood still. Not at attention. Not blocking. Just there, between the car and the exit. Because until someone gave him a different order, from a voice that actually mattered, no one was taking that Range Rover anywhere. Not without going through him first. By noon the mist had burned off, leaving a pale Highland sun that stretched long shadows across the gravel court. Birds flitted between the stone chimneys. Horses stomped quietly in the lower stables. And down the sloped drive toward the estate, a silver trailer rolled into view, the kind designed to transport vintage cars without so much as a scratch. Sergeant Lachlan Reddick didn't move. He stood exactly where he'd been for the past 40 minutes, 2 meters from the defender's front left fender, arms relaxed, face unreadable. He'd seen the plates on that trailer before. Discreet, civilian, rented, no royal transport tags, no crown affiliation, just the sort of anonymity one uses when they don't want questions asked. The trailer pulled to a stop. Thomas Parker Bowles stepped out from the passenger side, smooth as ever, designer jacket, polished boots. A clipboard tucked under one arm, like it was just another Thursday at the estate. He smiled when he saw Reddick. "Sergeant," he called, as if greeting an old acquaintance. "Lovely day for a bit of inheritance management, isn't it?" Reddick didn't answer. Thomas approached casually, glancing over the defender's bonnet. "She still smells like petrol and mothballs. God, I remember this old thing. Took it across the back trails once with Mum when I was a teenager. She nearly flipped it going downhill," he laughed. "Kept going on about how the Queen would have had her head if she dented it. Funny how things change. Now it's just sitting here collecting dust when it could actually be useful." He ran his hand along the doorframe, almost possessive. "Mum said the old girl left some personal effects inside. Nothing important. Just maps and journals, estate nonsense. We'll clear those out, of course. Can't have decades-old hiking notes rattling around when I'm using it for country events." Reddick's jaw tightened. So they already knew what was in the glove box. This wasn't opportunistic. It was targeted. "Estate nonsense," Reddick repeated slowly. Thomas caught the tone and backpedaled slightly. "Well, sentimental, I'm sure, but not exactly relevant anymore, is it?" Reddick remained still. Behind them, the trailer driver began lowering the loading ramp. A valet emerged from the opposite side of the garage, holding the ignition fob like a waiter presenting a vintage wine bottle. Thomas took it without hesitation. "Appreciate the prep," he said. "Camilla's instructions were quite clear. Said I was to bring it back to Windsor today. Might use it for the photo op next week." That was the moment Reddick moved, just a step. But it was enough to place his body directly between the vehicle and the trailer's open mouth. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" "That vehicle is not permitted to leave these grounds." Thomas blinked, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "I beg your pardon?" Reddick's voice didn't change. "That Defender was verbally sealed post-funeral by Princess Anne. Its status is preserved as static memorial equipment. No work order, no chain of custody, no transfer rights." Thomas chuckled, light and condescending. "Sergeant, I admire the formality, truly. But this is family business. The Queen's gone, and the vehicle's not doing much good sitting in a garage." Reddick didn't flinch. "It's not just a vehicle." Thomas's grin faded slightly. "Look, I have authorization. Camilla signed off herself. You can log it however you like, just don't get in the way." He moved to step around the bonnet. But before his foot hit gravel, another voice floated through the archway behind him. "Ceremonial fuss, Thomas. Don't waste your breath." Camilla appeared beneath the colonnade, gloved hands folded, expression unreadable. She looked at the Defender, then at Reddick, and smiled. "Let the man do his duty. Then we'll show him what real authority looks like." Camilla crossed the gravel like someone arriving to approve flowers at a funeral she hadn't planned. One hand gloved, one bare, always calculated. She didn't look at the vehicle, not at first. Her eyes swept the gathering, the ramp, the trailer, the silent standoff between the Queen's guard and her son. "Thomas," she said coolly, "is there a reason Sergeant Reddick is blocking my son's car?" Reddick didn't speak. Thomas cleared his throat. "We've got the paperwork. He's just being thorough." Camilla turned fully to face the Defender. At last, she looked at it. Not long, just a glance, enough to confirm it was there. Then back to Reddick. "Sergeant, I appreciate your diligence, but this transfer was approved by me for private family use." "It was never a family vehicle, Reddick replied evenly. "It was personal property, used solely by Her Majesty. After her passing, Princess Anne instructed it be preserved as is, sealed and static. That verbal order was logged and actioned." Camilla smiled, faintly but not kindly. "I'm aware of Anne's sentiments, but she is not the sovereign, Sarge. Charles is, and I act in his name, under his full confidence that if a vehicle sits idle in a garage long enough, it ceases to be sacred. It becomes impractical." Reddick's voice dropped a note. "That impractical vehicle carried Her Majesty across 3 generations of military reviews and the last 4 years of personal engagement. It's in Royal Registry under singular control. It is not meant for transfer." Camilla tilted her head. "And yet it was cleaned, unlocked and prepped. So, unless that happened by divine intervention, I'd say someone knew the proper authority had spoken." She gestured to the clipboard Thomas held. "Signed this morning. You'll find it all in order." Reddick took a step closer, slowly. "I've seen the clipboard, ma'am. What I haven't seen is a single transfer authorization that bears the initials of the person who sealed it. You're quoting protocol. I'm honouring memory." Camilla's voice sharpened. "You're obstructing private logistics. That's well above your pay grade." "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "That's exactly my pay grade." Thomas muttered something under his breath. Camilla stepped closer. "I'll have your name flagged at Windsor if this continues." Reddick didn't blink. "Then flag it. But make sure your report includes the sealed inventory list and the key cabinet log. Both signed, both dated, both untouched until this morning." She froze for just a second. It was enough. Then she turned, smiling over her shoulder, like the matter had been settled. "Don't waste your breath on him," she said to Thomas. "He'll be rotated out next week. It'll move then." Reddick watched her disappear down the colonnade, and he knew, with crystal certainty, that she wasn't finished. But neither was he. The quietest parts of Balmoral weren't the stables or the corridors or even the woods at dusk. They were the conversations that didn't echo. Reddick walked the long gravel perimeter of the sealed garage, checking the locks again. Not because he thought someone would break them, but because he needed the rhythm. Clip, pause, clip, pause. The footfalls helped him think. He slipped the encrypted tablet from his belt, opened the private channel, and keyed the same contact he'd flagged earlier. This time he didn't type. He called. 2 rings, then a voice. Female, clipped, unreadable. Not Anne, but close enough to her to carry weight. "Sergeant, I need clarification," Reddick said, scanning the hills beyond the courtyard. "The Green Defender. It's been activated, prepped for transfer to Windsor by Camilla's office. I believe she's giving it to her son." Silence. "Time is short." "I need to know if the seal was informal or absolute," Reddick continued. "Verbal holds don't always make it to the archive." This time it was Anne herself who answered. He recognized her voice immediately. "Sergeant Reddick." He stood straighter. "Ma'am." "That vehicle was removed from rotation by my mother's hand 2 weeks before her passing, not by my order, by hers." Reddick stayed silent. She placed her private Highland journal in the glove box, folded them herself, left the compartment unlocked. Anne's voice was steady, but something underneath it wasn't. Alongside them were 2 field maps marked by her, walking routes, estate notes, land transitions she never got to publish. "I found them when I was instructed to finalize Balmoral's personal archive. The fob was placed back in the storage box. Her final instructions were clear. This one stays. It belongs to the place." Reddick closed his eyes. The Defender wasn't just a vehicle. It was a vessel. The Queen hadn't wanted it preserved as memory. She had preserved herself inside it. "If they move it," Anne said softly, "they move the last trace of her." "I understand, ma'am." There was a pause, then a quieter response. "Do you?" "I do now." Reddick felt the chill settle in his bones, not from the wind, but from the weight of something he'd only just realized he was standing guard over. Anne didn't issue an order, didn't tell him what to do. She didn't have to. She simply ended the call and left him there, alone, with the knowledge that the most powerful woman in the country had placed a portion of her legacy in a piece of metal and rubber and glass, and that now it was his job to keep it from being turned into someone else's souvenir. The trailer was back, this time with its ramp already down and engine humming. The driver didn't look up from his task, didn't speak. He moved like someone who'd been told this would be quick, in and out, no complications. Thomas Parker Bowles returned in a grey sport coat and sunglasses, holding a document folder thicker than before. The kind that people carry, not because they're necessary, but because they want to look like they are. Behind him came 2 aides, not Balmoral staff, but borrowed from Windsor. They moved briskly. One peeled off to prep the hydraulic lift. The other approached the Defender with a handheld scanner. "Whoa," Reddick said, stepping forward. "No further access." The aide glanced up, confused. "We're just scanning VIN for inventory." "I said no access." Thomas stepped in with the practiced air of someone used to resolving misunderstandings with charm. "Sergeant," he began, "I understand the attachment. Truly, I do. But let's not drag this out. It's a car. A beautiful one, but still just a car. And today, that car is coming with me." "No," Reddick said flatly. "It's not." Thomas sighed theatrically. "We've got clearance. My mother's signature is on every document. Here." He flipped open the folder, holding it toward Reddick like a winning hand. "This is the authorization. Personal assignment, fully logged." Reddick didn't take it. "I don't need your paperwork. You're obstructing royal transport. I'm protecting a sealed legacy asset. That's not your call to make." "Yes, it is," Reddick said, voice rising for the first time. All movement in the courtyard stilled. The aides looked up. The valet, who'd been polishing nearby, dropped his rag without noticing. Even the birds seemed to hush for a moment. Thomas blinked. "Excuse me?" "You don't get to erase the last thing she loved," Reddick said, loud now, firm. "Not for optics, not for access, not for a photo op." Camilla's voice rang out from behind the pillar before Thomas could respond. "Sergeant Reddick," she called, sweeping into view, "are you shouting at my son?" "No, ma'am," Reddick said, turning. "I'm shouting at a breach of dignity." Her heels tapped sharply as she crossed the court. "This is insubordination." This is remembrance. You're speaking out of turn. Reddick stepped in front of the defender, square, unmoving. My place is between theft and remembrance. That vehicle stays. Camilla narrowed her eyes. You're making this bigger than it is. No, he replied. You are, because you thought no one would stop you. Thomas looked between them, rattled now. This wasn't going the way he'd imagined. Camilla raised her chin. You've made your point, she said, turning sharply on her heel. Let's see how long it lasts. But Reddick didn't watch her walk away. He was watching the road, because someone else was coming. The sound of tyres on gravel was different this time. Not rushed, not ostentatious, just startled. Like the vehicle had been driving for hours and didn't need anyone to know it had arrived. A black SUV curved petulantly into the courtyard. No markings, no escort. The kind of arrival that didn't belong to the sovereign or the spectacle, but to someone who understood the rules and when to break them. Princess Anne stepped out. No fanfare, no aides in tow. Just her, dressed in a tailored field coat, dark slacks and riding boots still dusted with stable dirt. She glanced once at the defender, then at the trailer, then at the standoff. She didn't speak. Camilla saw her first. Anne, she called, smoothing her coat like it would help. I wasn't expecting you up this week. Anne said nothing, just kept walking. Reddick stepped back one pace, not out of submission, but clarity. This was her scene now. Thomas took a nervous step forward. It's a misunderstanding, really. So the sergeant got some old notes confused. Anne held up a hand. Silence returned. She approached the defender, circled it once, and stopped by the driver's door. This wasn't on the Windsor manifest, she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Camilla forced a smile. It was last minute. Thomas needed something familiar for an upcoming media push. We thought a personal connection would help. Anne turned slowly. That's not something, she said, voice cold as the Scottish air. That's her silence, and it stays where she left it. Camilla blinked. You can't seriously believe. Don't, Anne snapped. Don't start with belief. We're past belief. We're in memory now, and memory doesn't belong to those who edit it. Thomas looked ready to speak again, but one glance from Anne kept him still. She looked at Reddick and... Sergeant? Ma'am. Do you require confirmation? No, ma'am. Do as you were trained, he nodded once. Camilla stepped forward, trying to recover authority with posture alone. This isn't protocol. This is sentiment. Charles will hear about this. Anne's eyes didn't leave Reddick. Good, she let him. And with that, she walked past all of them, straight toward the stables, as if nothing more needed to be said. Because it didn't. She had spoken not as a sister, nor as a royal, but as the only person left who remembered how to protect the things their mother never asked to have defended. The Range Rover rolled backward into the garage on neutral gear, its engine off, its presence undeniable. Sergeant Lachlan Reddick walked beside it, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the driver's door. He didn't need to steer it. The two junior guards helping guide the wheels already understood. Every movement was to be made in silence. No orders, no chatter, no ceremony. Just respect. When the Defender came to a halt in its original bay, the one where the Queen had left it the summer before her death, Reddick stepped back. He took the ignition fob from his pocket, inserted it into the dash, and powered the system just long enough to register the shutdown sequence. Then he powered it off completely. No final revo, no farewell, just stillness. He reached into the back compartment and retrieved the security chain. It was the same one used for ceremonial vault closures, polished, aged brass, with a single plaque etched simply, Private Order, Classed Memorial. He looped it once through the door handles, sealed the magnetic clasp, and pressed his thumb against the biometric pad on the wall panel. A red light blinked green. The lock engaged with a low, satisfying clunk. Finished. Reddick stood there a moment longer. Then, from his breast pocket, he removed a small, laminated tag. Simple handwriting, penned by the Princess Royal herself after the Queen's passing. He folded it, slid it into a weatherproof sleeve, and taped it across the Defender's steering wheel with clear, archival tape. It read, Legacy, do not disturb. Outside, the trailer was already pulling away. Thomas stood beside it with arms crossed, his sunglasses now tucked in his hand, expression unreadable. He didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Camilla hadn't returned. She was watching from the archway, half concealed behind the pillar. Her lips were thin, her arms folded. She didn't interrupt. She didn't approach, and no one invited her closer. As Reddick exited the garage, he passed Thomas without slowing. Thomas muttered, "This wasn't supposed to be dramatic." Reddick didn't look at him. "Then you shouldn't have touched her keys." He continued walking, each step measured, precise. Behind him, Camilla said nothing, not because she had lost, but because she'd been excluded. And in her world, that was far worse. Up ahead, Princess Anne was already disappearing into the stables, her silhouette framed by golden afternoon light. She hadn't lingered for thanks, hadn't offered comfort or consequence, because that wasn't the point. The point had been made. And now, the defender sat in silence once more, exactly where the Queen had left it. That night, the castle slept early. The stables had gone quiet. The hills beyond Balmoral rolled into blackness, their shapes softened by low fog, and the hush that only came after a confrontation no one dared name. Staff retired to their quarters. The radios stayed off. But inside the Royal Motor Court, one man remained. Sergeant Lachlan Reddick stepped through the side door of the garage just after midnight, flashlight in hand, but switched off. He didn't need the light. He knew this place better than his own flat in Edinburgh. Every echo, every oil stain, every creak of timber above the sealed bays, they were part of the job. But tonight, they felt heavier. He approached the defender without sound. It looked different in the dark, not as a car, not even as property, just presence, the kind that lingers after someone's gone, but before their memory hardens into myth. He reached for the chain, but didn't unlock it. Instead, he leaned forward and peered through the glass, the glove compartment. He hesitated, then opened the driver's door just slightly and reached inside. It clicked open with the softest push. Inside lay a neatly folded square of patterned fabric, royal tartan, a scarf, the Queen's unmistakably, tucked in carefully beside a pair of clipped reading glasses and a leather-bound notepad with no crest, just a simple elastic loop keeping it shut. Beneath that, two folded Ordnance Survey maps with handwritten annotations in the margins, trail markers, wildlife sightings, dates penciled in her neat script. Glen Muick, 14th of Septi, fog cleared by noon. Lochnagar Path. Philip's favourite needs repair, and tucked in the very back, wrapped in tissue paper, a single photograph, black and white. The Queen, much younger, standing beside the defender with Philip, both of them muddy, both of them laughing. Reddick stared at it for a long moment. This wasn't just memory, it was proof that she'd lived beyond the crown, beyond duty, that she'd chosen this place, this vehicle, these hills, as the truest version of herself. He didn't open the notebook, didn't touch the scarf, didn't even breathe too deeply. He closed the compartment, slow and reverent. Then he stepped back, sealed the door again, and checked the lock one last time, not because he doubted it, but because she would have. Outside, a single fox crossed the gravel path and vanished into the mist. And somewhere in the garage, the last breath of her lavender perfume, embedded deep in the defender's upholstery, still lingered like something unfinished. Reddick stood there for another minute, then turned and left the vehicle and the woman it carried to rest exactly where she'd chosen, in silence. Do you think that vehicle should have been handed over, or preserved as it was? Was the guard right to raise his voice? And if you were Princess Anne, would you have stepped in sooner? Tap that like button if you believe legacy should never be repurposed. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on so you never miss a story they'd rather keep behind closed gates. Share this video with someone who still remembers the Queen behind the wheel, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, right here.